Hello, hello to all of our friends in Parent Queen Village. We are back after a first part of conversation that we had with Tanya Hackney, who is a parent of five, a former educator, and a published author. Her book is called Leaving the
Leaving the
Safe
Safe
Harbor.
Harbor.
And she and her husband have lived aboard their 48-foot sailing catamaran and have raised their kids while traveling full time. So clearly, she's a big fan of becoming unplugged. Not to say technology is bad, but to limit technology, kind of the whole everything in moderation idea. But she's obviously also a very big proponent of adventure and travel. And during the month of April, one of our themes here at Parent Queen Village is global adventure, which is why I wanted to have her join us this month. So, first of all, thank you for the first part of the conversation and welcome back for part two, Tanya.
Thank you very much. And thanks for the opportunity to just talk about adventure. It's like my favorite thing to talk about.
It's like your tagline at this point, isn't it?
Exactly.
So, obviously, as a full time sailor, and for me as a full time RVer, we have some commonalities about going a non traditional route or getting off the beaten path. Has its risks. It is uncomfortable. It is not without its challenges. Let me tell you, if anybody listening doesn't know what we went through as we launched our RV adventure, holy cow, it's been a doozy. But you are telling me, Tanya, that it's worth it. Please tell me that it's worth it.
It's totally worth it. The first
Okay,
year,
good.
I would say the first year is the hardest. That's where you're working out some of the major kinks. That's where a lot of
That's
the
what they tell me.
that's where a lot of the breakage happens, and you're
Mhm.
fixing things kind of they're breaking faster than you can fix them sometimes. That was absolutely true for our boat. It was crazy at the beginning, and of course, I had, like, toddlers running around. We had leaky hatches, and I had a two-year-old who would run around and dump like, we would put bowls and cups and pots under the leaky hatches, and he thought it was fun to run around dumping the bowls. Ah! Yeah, it was
At least
crazy.
I don't have that.
Right, and if somebody turns a seacock, like, the boat could sink, so we had a few interesting, electrical problems, leaky problems, we tried to sink our boat, but filling a water tank one time, like, why are the floorboards floating? Oh, we forgot to turn the water off when we were filling the tank. Yeah, it was crazy.
Okay.
Storms at sea, you don't have to deal with storms at sea, there's that.
No, I just have to deal with storms on land because we are still
Yeah,
a 40-foot sail. So
I don't
driving
really know,
with
like,
wind is a challenge.
oh, I bet. I didn't think about
Yeah,
that. So it's probably really loud when it rains or when it's windy, because that's how it is on our
it
boat
can
too.
be. It can be. Yeah, and the wind is not our friend, certainly. And we
Mm.
have lots of other vehicles that we need to navigate. We have vehicles who like to cut us off. We're 20,000 pounds, 18, 20,000 pounds. We do not
You're
stop on
not
a
gonna be
dime,
stopping no, and a boat doesn't
you
stop
know.
on a dime either.
Right. So there's definitely challenges, but tell me, what's the upside? Why are you such a proponent that it's worth it? Give me
Uh,
hope.
okay, even the hardship is worth it. This is what I would say about it, because I had this wonderful conversation with my oldest kid, who's now 22, and I was asking him, like, what looking back on it at his childhood. He was, 7 when we first saw the boat. He was 18 or 19 when he moved off the boat. So it was the majority of his childhood on the boat. And
Mhm.
I wanted to know what were the good things that he remembered and what were the, bad things. And I was trying to get him to kind of summarize for me. And what he said was super surprising. I thought he would talk about, like swimming with whale sharks and hiking up volcanoes, those being like the positive experiences and the benefits. And then I thought he would talk about, the storms at sea and the, being in close quarters or those hot, steamy nights, where the mosquitoes were bad and we had to shut up the windows and you just be like rolling around in pools of your own sweat, like some of the negative things. But actually, what he said was that the hard things made him who he is and that they made him more resilient. He's actually really
Mm.
thankful for the hardship. And that came as a surprise to me, that for a 22-year-old to be astute enough
Mhm.
or self-reflective enough to be able to already count the hardships as a blessing. So, I guess looking back on it, we've been doing this for 16 years now. All the good things certainly are memorable, but the
Mhm.
hard things are what we tell stories about, and they are the places where we did the most learning. So, going on an
Mhm.
adventure is worth it because it grows you as a human being, but nobody said it was gonna be comfortable. So it
Right.
starts with the shrinking pains, right? You've experienced the shrinking pains, like when you have
Mhm.
to decide what earthly belongings are important to you. and you're having to trade stuff for experiences, which
Mhm.
sounds pretty, but also means divesting yourself of stuff, and that's
Right.
culturally very difficult and very
We're
counterculture.
a we're a very stuffed society.
Mhm. Yeah,
So
you're
yeah,
making
for
hard
sure.
choices.
Mhm.
And then, and then you're opening yourself up to what you said, which is risk. And risk is in the title of my book because the
Mhm.
lifestyle that we lead, and maybe yours too, I don't know, I haven't spent any time on an RV, but involves actual risk to life and limb. If our kids had fallen overboard, which
Mhm.
has happened, there are deaths from drowning. There
Mhm.
are pirates, there are sharks, there are shipwrecks. We have not, thank God, experienced sharks, shipwrecks, or pirates, but we have run aground and we have been in really awful sea conditions. And, we have had scary moments where nobody was allowed on deck because it was, you were in danger of being washed overboard. Um,
Sure.
we've been in countries and places that were a little dicey, that where you wouldn't walk alone at night, or where you don't
Mhm.
speak the language, or we've put ourselves in dangerous places. We've allowed our
Mhm.
kids to take some risks. We were in the Bahamas one year and we let our kid climb this amazing rock cliff because we have a kid who's a climber. And I looked over at my husband at one point and I'm like, if he falls, we're like 100 miles, like, open water from, like, a real hospital. Even if we wanted to call a helicopter, I don't even know, if we could get a helicopter here fast enough, and if he actually, like, fell where he's climbing onto the rocks, like, could we even recover the body? And at that point, I was like, "I'm just gonna go over here and play with Rachel." Like, my youngest at the time, like, "I can't even watch this anymore." Like, it was kinda cool
Oh
to
my
watch him
gosh.
climb this cliff, but I'm like, as a mom, you have to kind of silence those what ifs. I have an
Mhm.
amazing imagination for worst case scenarios, and I just have to shut that part I have to shut that part of my brain down all the time.
Oh, I don't think you're alone in that. I don't think you're alone in
No,
that at all.
no, and if you look
So
up adventure woman in the dictionary, my picture is not in that category. Like, I was like high anxiety, lots of energy, like, again, a good active imagination. I have to choose not to listen to those fears. Otherwise, I would still
right.
be living in suburbia.
No, but I like the point that you make, that that's a choice, that you can choose not to let the fears restrain you. So let me ask you, I know one of the things that you talk about is that exploring and getting outdoors is transformative, not only for an individual, but for the family. Talk to me about your experience there.
The thing that we often talk about when we're together now, the 7 of us, the rare occasions when all 7 of us are in the same place, because now people are starting to scatter to the 4 winds, or when we're on the phone with each other, we're reminiscing about these places that we've been, and what I've discovered is we reminisce mostly about people that we've met or the places that we've been, and it's almost always about the natural settings. Hiking at night in the rainforest up in um, up in Costa Rica, or free diving in like the most amazing, clear, beautiful water, uh, swimming with whale sharks, or hiking up volcanoes. Like, we talk about these nature places that are so near and dear to us. Those form the framework of our stories. They form the backdrop of our lives. Um, and think there's an answer buried in there to your question.
Yeah.
I got all
No,
carried away remembering
yeah,
all
no,
these
that's
beautiful
that's
things.
well, and I think that right there tells you, like, whatever our experiences are, that's what impacts us. And so being able to get out in nature transforms what our experiences could be, right? That
Yeah. Oh, I know what it
and
was. Yes. Yeah, there's a teamwork aspect when you are on a hike and you've got, like, the
Mhm.
littlest member of your crew and you have to, like, you've got some kids that are already at the top of the mountain and you've got, like, this, the ones with the little short legs, and there's this togetherness that happens, and then you experience, the beautiful view from the top, and it makes whatever was difficult about that hike,
Mhm.
worth it. Or
Awesome.
sometimes it's a terrible memory. Like, one time my 5-year-old drank all of her water on the way up the volcano. We were hiking up the Quill uh, in Statia in the Dutch Caribbean, and we get to the top, and she's like, "I'm really, really thirsty," and we're like, "Well, Where's your water? And she's like, I drank it all. So we hike back down, and none of us had enough water for that day. It was so hot. And we tell this story not because it was so amazing, but we laugh about it because it was so awful. Like,
Well,
remember
and
that
you're
time mom made
grateful
us
that it
hike up?
wasn't
Yeah.
and you're grateful that it wasn't problematic because lack of water, like dehydration in some circumstances can become fatal.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we can laugh about it and talk about that awful day because it ended well, for sure.
Right. Right. Talk to me about the
Mm.
impact that travel has on um education and awareness and contributing to world peace and all that. We can wax a little philosophical here for a minute.
Sure. Well, aside from getting outside of what's comfortable for you and forcing you to examine who you are as a human being and testing your own boundaries, you're, brushing up against other cultures. And so travel is absolutely the best education. I'm pretty sure there's a Mark Twain quote to that effect. It
Mhm.
it destroys prejudice, and you begin to realize what you have in common with the rest of the human family. It's really good for It was good for our family to be on little islands where we were the only white people, and to understand what that feels like to be other, or to be misunderstood, or to not speak the language. Like, that's a really
Mhm.
important role reversal when you live in the United States. Maybe you live in a little enclave or a conclave in a community that where everybody kind of looks like you, and you don't
Mhm.
know what that feels like, and it makes you more sensitive when you come back to your home
Mhm.
country. You begin to see people in a way that you didn't see before. You
Mhm.
notice things that you didn't notice before. So it definitely made us more sensitive, compassionate people. We just grew to love. We just grew to love people, and we spent a lot of time. We spent almost a year in Panama. We spent 10 months in Guatemala. We, like, became like family with the cruising community, and then with these locals that we would engage with. We did a lot of volunteer work. Our kids, one of the benefits I definitely am so grateful for is that our kids don't take anything for granted. Their lives were a
Mhm.
little bit uncomfortable, but, to be fair, we're traveling on what many consider a luxury yacht. Now, compared to
Mhm.
some of the fancy yachts we saw, we're like, we're the
Mhm.
riffraff. But compared to people living in a hut, with an outhouse hanging out over the mangroves, our lives look very, very posh. And we had these, close encounters with people living very, very different lives than we live, and our kids do not take anything for granted. They are not
Mhm.
entitled. They don't waste food. Like, they eat what's on their plate because they recognize how precious those resources are. They
Mhm.
don't waste water because we either have to carry or make all the water.
Oh, your own
Um,
fresh water, yeah.
yeah, our own fresh water. We have a water maker, which then costs energy. So they are also people who turn the lights out when they leave a room. Um, we had an energy budget and a water budget. They're just, we all became people who were very thoughtful about
Mhm.
kind of every aspect of our lives. We hand washed our clothes for a while and hung them out on the line. And you don't you don't take things for granted after you've lived that way.
Mhm.
So, travel is good for lots of reasons, culturally, work ethic, enjoyment of natural
Mhm.
surroundings. I mean, even the hardships, like I said, were also valuable.
Well, and it strikes me, we had a conversation yesterday with a woman where she was talking about as the adults, we are raising thinkers. And so it
Mhm.
sounds to me, to your point of your kids are very thoughtful, they're very aware, they're very conscious of the folks around them. That's the same concept as what she was going after. She went at a different way as a, solo mom of 3 by the age of 26, hopping into a boat, selling it like she didn't have a house to sell, whatever. Like she was just a different experience, but you're both coming at the or from the perspective of we're raising kids who think not only of themselves but also of others and of the earth and of the resources that we have and the way that they utilize those resources and the way they engage with others. They're just thoughtful human beings.
Yeah, and ours, at least, because they were homeschooled, it wasn't that we weren't with a community of kids. There were plenty of kids. Like, we met lots and lots of families,
Sure.
doing what we were doing. They kind of stack up during hurricane seasons, and there's like this sort of
Hmm.
social feast and famine. And then there's long periods of isolation. but they weren't subject to the same kind of peer pressure that they would have been if we had raised them in the United States. It didn't necessarily make it easy to travel with teenagers. Like, it was definitely easier when they were little.
Yep.
Teenagers still want connection, they still want friendships, they still want, normal.
Mhm.
Even though normal was sort of something that we always disparaged, like, who would want normal? We had normal. Normal is boring. Like,
Right.
don't be
Right.
normal, be abnormal, be exceptional. Um, but they still wanted those things and they still want to fit in. And, raising free thinkers is amazing, but it also makes them a little lonely because they don't go along with the crowd and they don't think like the crowd. There's
Mhm.
an upside and a downside to that too.
Mhm. Talk to me about, so you talked about some of the social aspects of, because that's also, I mean, it's developmentally appropriate for kids in that teen tween age range to have a peer group that becomes more important in many ways than their family
Mm.
unit. Because that's the age when they're starting to identify who they are as individuals distinct from the family unit. So in addition to that aspect of like that they just wanted that community, which you had,
Mhm.
what are some of the other things that make traveling with teenagers logistically or realistically more challenging than traveling with littles?
They're moody and they have an opinion. So when you have little kids, you're like, "Hey guys, we're gonna go ashore today and we're gonna go to the beach. And then, we found this cool little beach bar and we're gonna go have lunch at the beach bar. Or, today we're gonna ride the little white train tour." We were in Martinique, and I'm like, "Well, I can just translate the tour. I speak French, so we'll take this little train tour and get the history of Saint Pierre, where this massive volcano blew up, and I have to like translate this whole." And you're just like, "Come on, guys, this is what we're doing for school today." By the time they're teenagers, they have an opinion about it, and maybe they don't feel like doing that day. And we, whether wisely or unwisely, I'm not sure, raise our kids with logical fallacies and a basic kind of understanding of argumentation and logic. And by the time they're teenagers and they've developed that, they like poke holes in all of my arguments. Like they called red herring on me and told me I was building a straw man, and they're telling me like, so I gave them the tools with which, to argue with me.
With which to rebel.
Yes,
Well done, mom.
exactly. "Here, let me explain how you do this, how you say, Mom, that's a red herring. I'm not buying that. I'm not buying what you're selling." And then in the end, you sound like your parents. You're like, "Okay, we're gonna go do this because I said so." So I hate resorting to "because I said so." I would much rather, persuade. But with teenagers, they need to have a voice. We always said we didn't it's not a democracy. Our family's not a democracy. You don't get a vote, but you absolutely do get a say. And so when we were trying to decide where to go or
Mhm.
when to go or how long to stay in a place, we asked them, "Well, what do you think about this? What do you think about where we should go? What should our travel itinerary look like this year?" And of course, if you have 7 people, you have a tiebreaker at least. There's lots of discussion. I mean, for example, we were in Panama, we were in the canal zone, we were, just hanging out for hurricane season, and we saw a bunch of people getting their boats ready to cross the Pacific Ocean. And I can tell you that's like a virus. It catches. I wanna go. I'm like, "Look at all these people getting ready to go. I wanna go to French Polynesia. This sounds amazing." My oldest son was all on board. He was like, "Yeah, let's do it. Let's cross the Pacific. Let's go through the Panama Canal." My youngest 2 were kinda like, "Maybe, I can see us doing that." They don't really care. You could drag them anywhere. The middle 2 were, like, violently opposed. I mean, to the point where they were like, "If you decide to take this boat through the Panama Canal, I'm getting off the boat and I'm gonna go live with grandma." Like, really felt very strongly about it, and one of them gets horrifically seasick, so obviously,
Mhm.
we do a lot of coastal cruising because of that. And the other one was a teenage girl, and she was like, "I don't even wanna be here. I wanna go back to the United States. I want my friends." And she had made some really good friends while we were traveling, but they don't always follow you where you're going. So,
Mhm.
it's a mixed bag. Sometimes she had, a lot of really close friends, and sometimes she was lonely, so I totally understand that. And we really tried to listen to our kids. I'm sure they're annoyed that we didn't always do what they wanted us to do, but we
Sure.
did listen.
And I like the way that you said you don't get a vote, but you have a say. Or what I thought you were going was you don't get a vote, but you have a voice. Same
Yeah,
idea, just
same
a little
idea.
bit of
Yep.
connotation in there. So tell me as we wrap up, for families that can't necessarily, like, they don't find themselves in situations where they can go live aboard a boat or live, on a uh, what's the word, traveling basis.
Mhm.
One of the points that you make is collect verbs, not nouns. How can they start doing more of this, even if a full time lifestyle like this is just not only an impossibility, but they don't want it, right? Like,
Right. I mean, not everybody wants to cram their family of 7 on a boat and, go sailing through treacherous waters. Like, that doesn't sound like fun to everybody, and I totally understand why.
right.
Um, but I would say we all have, we have limited resources,
Hmm.
financial, energy, and time, but you get to decide how to spend them. You do not have to be trapped into thinking the way that your culture thinks or doing what your family says that you should do. It's your life. You get one chance at this. And if you have money, you can use it to collect stuff. You can buy a bigger house. You can get a nicer car. I do not drive a nice car. Um, I and I wear clothes until they wear out. Like we don't we chose to not invest in stuff and we take that money and we travel with it. We
Hmm.
buy food and fuel and we go to the Bahamas for 3 months. That's like the same cost as Disney tickets for one day.
Hmm.
So it's all about the choices that you make. We talked a little bit earlier about going out into nature. That's not an expensive choice. It's time expensive, but not
Hmm.
money expensive. So that's something
Hmm.
that's available to everybody. Um, Choosing experiences and relationships over material things is very countercultural. But in the end, all those things will land in landfills, and all of
Hmm.
those experiences will be things that you get to keep forever. I mean,
Right.
they make up the fabric of who you are and the memories that you have, and when you prioritize those relationships, those are investments that just will pay
Hmm.
back for the rest of your life. It's huge. And then, like,
Yeah.
birthdays, here's a perfect example of collecting verbs and not nouns. Christmas and birthdays, we gave up gift giving pretty much
Hmm.
the year or 2 after we bought the boat. We realized we were gonna sink the boat with presents. That didn't
With the
make
stuff,
any
right?
sense. Yeah. And so instead of asking our kids, "What do you want for your birthday?" we'll say, "What do you want to do for your
To do.
birthday?"
Hmm.
And the things that they have chosen to do are amazing, just like RVing out in the jungle when we were living in Panama, or going on a fishing charter to do some deep sea fishing on a power boat, which our boat, we do some deep sea fishing, but it's not like it's not fabulous.
Hmm.
Going horseback riding up in the mountains, or surfing. One year, my 10-year-old wanted a surfing birthday, so we just happened to be in a place that had a surf school and surfboard rentals, and we started exploring that. And so we're taking the same resources those resources are available to everybody. Time,
Hmm.
at least we all have 24
Hmm.
hours in a day, so that part is the
Hmm.
same. Obviously,
Hmm.
financially is going to be different for each family, but you can always choose relationships and experiences over stuff.
I accidentally muted myself. My husband and I did that when we went on our honeymoon. We spent a week in Cabo, and we actually asked folks, instead of stuff, because we'd lived together for a real long time before we actually got married. We said we don't need more things, but we asked for a honeymoon registry basically, and folks
Oh,
contributed
that's great.
years, and by the time we were done, we had to throw in $25 to give ourselves. We had like three different amazing excursions that we did because we didn't want to be on the go all the time. We did take some downtime and relax a little bit, but those are the things that we think about. Those, like, I don't remember the names of the restaurants where we went and had three different types of tequila. I remember the hike that we took in the national forest, and that once we were able to crest a mountain view and look out, and you could see this entire oasis. It was the only time I remember ever seeing an oasis in my life. Like, everything was just desertous and dry, and there was just this greenery right in the middle, and it was this beautiful oasis. Like, I can see it in my mind's eye today, and it's been 14
Yeah.
years. So I'm totally on board as the cray cray who has now gone into an RV lifestyle. It's those experiences, even some of the challenges. So
Mhm.
we're about 6 months in right now. And so I'm like, all right, that means we've got about another 6 months to round out our first year. So thank you for
Mhm.
the hope that once I get through the first year, things will be a little easier. But I'm really excited that we've gotten a chance rather to have this conversation, Tanya. Thank you so much. Again, your book is, name it's escaping me, but share it one more time.
It's okay. Leaving the Safe Harbor: The Risks and Rewards of Raising a Family on a Boat.
Awesome. And I would encourage anybody who's listening to go to your local bookstore. I know Tanya's a fan of local bookstores, as am I. Pick up a copy of it and see what kinds of little tidbits you can pull out. Maybe, again, you don't want to do what Tanya's family is doing or what my family is doing and living on the road or on the water full time, but let's look at ways that we can get more of those experiences in to help create more of those thinking, thoughtful kiddos along the way, shall we?
Yeah, the book is actually not I didn't write it with sailors in mind. I wrote it, for, like, someone who'd never been on a boat before, and I really wanted to focus on the existential journey and not just the physical journeys that we took. So I wanted it to be applicable to someone, maybe an armchair sailor and not like an
Mhm.
ocean sailor. So
That's
I think it's
awesome.
a book that has a lot of application, even
Awesome.
outside of this kind of adventure.
Fantastic. Tanya, thank you so much. Appreciate having you. And to everybody in Parent Tween Village, thank you for tuning in. And we will see you next time. Have a good one, everybody.